Okay. Next one, Tracy, again by one of our good friends, Anonymous. Where in the progression of going from dating to engagement and then ultimately marriage do you disclose parts of your story or negative sexual history? So when you're working with a young couple, a young man or young woman, what kind of advice do you give them about when's the right timing in that relationship to begin opening these parts of my story?
Well, I was kind of trying to think through the lens of our present culture, which it's pretty blatantly open. Sexuality is just talked about so openly.
Yeah.
So for me, I think now, in this generation, sharing earlier is better. It's not a shocking cultural taboo to talk about sexuality. I always have felt that prior to engagement, is the time to make sure that you've been fully honest with history, because people need to know going into an engagement period and a marriage, who they're choosing, what the history is, and the person sharing it needs to go in not wearing a mask, but being able to have, really know that person chose them, and to have real intimacy, you need to be able to build it on truth and on trust.
Yeah.
So I definitely always think prior to engagement, what you share. I mean, I think having some support around how you share and what you share. I think earlier, even as I said, there's not a lot of cultural taboos. How we share it can be, I'm in a group, I'm looking at this area of my life, I'm getting healthy, versus we don't always need to share details, and sometimes they're not that helpful.
Right.
So reaching out to someone maybe older than us, or a mentor, or someone that can help us know, how do I share that? What do I share? And how much do I share? I think that could be part of this question as well.
I'm wondering too, if this person who asked is single, and thinking like, if that's you, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous, that you would do the work now that isn't going to create this opportunity for this big blow up or this aha or the surprise moment in a relationship. Tracy, originally I had also written before engagement. I just feel like they are due that honor of knowing what they're saying yes to and getting into. But I think it kind of depends. Like, have you been in group? Do you understand your story? I feel like if you do, there's, elements you could absolutely do earlier. But if it's for sure the latest would be before engagement, I think it's really important to emphasize doing the work of preparing your full disclosure. Because I really do think what you said, what you say, how you say it, when you say it is important. But I think that's the importance of having a group or a clinician walking you through preparing a full disclosure to make sure that you're not leaving anything out so that you can protect yourself. They'll say yes, that kind of thing. Because the worst thing you can do in that moment is withhold information that comes out later and then blows up the relationship even more. Because if you're able to do a full disclosure, you're working in recovery, you've created some trust because of, being able to have this experience with hopefully, this individual who you'd like to marry. If they say yes with all the information at hand. Like, they're not going to be, feeling duped a couple of years in. And so again, I kind of go back to, if you're single and you're asking this question, start a recovery process now if you have any level of struggle, because you would rather be so prepared for this moment and understand it than to have no idea what's going on, and then exposure happens later in marriage and it blows up everyone's life.
Yeah. Not to disagree with you, but to make a slightly different point on that, I'd be thoughtful as a single person about preparing a full disclosure with the expectation that I'm going to share this in a dating relationship, because part of the reality is the need for full disclosure in a marriage is because the spouse has been hurt and betrayed by the behaviors of their partner. And so if you're in a dating relationship where the things you're disclosing are primarily or exclusively in the past and not in the time frame you've been dating, it may be worth asking the question, how much do they even want to know? How much nitty gritty? I mean, I think, yes, you need to cover the big bones. I think you need to cover the kind of the main topics, but then from there, kind of have some sensitivity to what is helpful to them versus just feeling. I think sometimes in recovery, we can feel there's this obligation to just back up the full dump truck and unload everything in that one conversation. And it's like, the relationship may not need that right now. And depending on person to person, they may not even want that. And so The word I wrote down about this, I know it sounds revolutionary, but I think we should ask the person first. Even if we think, okay, I think the timing is right, I would ask them and say, I feel like we're growing close, we're getting to know each other, and I see this relationship going somewhere. Would it be okay if I shared with you some of my decision making and around my sexuality before we were dating? Or I think just giving them the ability to say, I'm not ready for that. Or maybe I don't think we're as close as you think we are. Because when I think of like, what's the right timing? To me, it's the more you're getting a sense that this is a relationship that could last, that could be long-term, the greater the need for that level of transparency and vulnerability. It's like if you have a coworker, if you're at work and you have someone who comes in for a temp for one day, you don't unload the whole plan and give them all it's like, well, they got one day. How long are they going to be here? Just help with this one area. But if you know this is a long-term employee that's going to be here for the long haul, well, they need to be clued in on everything. They need to know what we're facing.
Yeah.
And I think that we could kind of take to relationships. When you're just going on a date or two, you're getting to know someone, focus on getting to know them and trying to figure out, do we have the kind of fit that this could be a pretty serious thing? But like I said, the more that sense for you grows, this is serious, and I think it's moving in a more serious direction, the greater the need for vulnerability comes. And then as you start to take those steps, I think taking your cues from the other person of what are they ready for, what do they want to know, and being willing to share, because what we do want to avoid that we've heard, unfortunately, in a couple of stories, and it's heartbreaking. It's when stuff comes out on the honeymoon. That's like, oh, well, I never told you. And it's like, ouch, that should never be the moment of surprise for them to find out you've had an active battle with pornography. Even if you're working on it, but it's still there, that's too, so we've talked about this before, that the first date's probably too soon, the wedding night's too late, and in between there is a lot of the Holy Spirit's leading and kind of trusting the timing of the relationship to read the room and start having that conversation.
And get support on what to share, how much to share, and what. I just think that's so important. You want to start your marriage in a healthy way, and so getting some support on how do I share this, what do I share, I think that's a really important piece.